I think I have microphone. All right. We'll call the meeting to order. Welcome commissioners, staff, petitioners, and citizens to the April 6th Mishawaka Plan Commission meeting. First off, we'll do introduction of staff. To my right, Donna Burkhart, Administrative Planner, is out today. We have Krista Hill, who's taking her role, as well as our Senior Planner, over to the right. Next, we have Shad Annis to my right, Associate Planner. On my left, we have Derek Spear, our City Planner. Ken Prince, our Executive Director, sitting right next to Derek. David Bent in the front row, our Legal Counsel. Krista, would you please call the roll?
Chris Jamrose.
Here.
Drew Cash.
Here.
Woody Emmons.
Yes.
Sam Cressy. Drew Johnson.
Here.
Randy Frost.
Here.
Kathleen Wygadich.
Here.
Michael Portalease.
Here.
Chris Torty.
Here. And before we start, I want to say a couple words about our Fire Chief, Dale Freeman, who served on this body for quite a long time. I was the president. He was the vice president. Of course, we all knew him as Chief Freeman. Recently died, succumbed to cancer. He was on the Board of Public Works and Safety. He was on this plan commission. And he was just the genuine nicest guy in the world. And I wanted to recognize that we no longer have him on this body and serving this city. But rest assured that his works are going on in the city, and everything he's done in the past will be seen. And one of the things I can sum up, I would always see Dale, and I would say, "Hey, Chief, how are you?" And he would always say, "Wonderful. If I were doing any better, I'd be you." And Chief would always say that, and he had a knack of making you feel better whenever you talked to him. So just 5 seconds of silence, a quick thought, a quick prayer for Chief. Rules of procedure are up on the board and to my right and to my left. We do all of our speaking at the podium. Please start with your name and address, and you can have your home or business address on there as well. We'll first hear a presentation by the petitioner. For each item, we'll ask those participating in the room to speak first, followed by those participating online. Then those who wish to speak in favor of the request will have a chance. Those who wish to speak against the request can come up. If you're not sure whether you're speaking for or against, and you just have general questions, I suggest you come up during the against. Then what we're going to try to do is accumulate all of those questions for a right of rebuttal by the petitioner. Then we'll close the public hearing, we'll hear a commission discussion, and then we will vote. The previous month's minutes, March, were distributed. Were there any corrections or additions to those? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the previous month's minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the previous month's minutes pass. Are there any conflict of interest to be declared on any of the agenda items tonight with the plan commissioners? Hearing none, we roll right into the first item, which will eventually go to the council with a favorable or unfavorable rating. It is petition 24-05, a request submitted by SEC Investments requesting to rezone from C1 General Commercial to C10 Filling Station Commercial for property located at the southeast corner of Douglas Road and Fur Road. Is there somebody to present this petition?
Mr. President, members of the Commission, my name is Stephen Studer. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Krieg DeVault with offices at 4101 Edison X Parkway here in Mishawaka. I'm here this evening requesting your favorable recommendation for rezoning 3 parcels from C1 commercial to C10 commercial to allow for Casey's Fuel Center and Convenience Store. With me this evening are representatives of Casey, including Mr. Richard McMahon, who is Casey's Senior Site Development Manager, along with Scott Schneider, who's a District Manager. Douglas Road currently serves over 14,000 vehicles a day. As we all know, with the new Mishawaka Athletic Facility going to coming on board this year, it's going to attract thousands more. And in addition to that, we all know that there's a future plan to widen Douglas Avenue all the way to Capitol Avenue. So it's a prime arterial highway, and it already serves 14,000. We expect that to significantly increase over the next few years. And with those developments, there comes a need for services, the types of services that Casey's can provide. Casey's is proposing a $5.5 to $6 million investment at this corner. It's the last developable corner at this location. Neither one of the other corners, other than Family Express, has already been developed. The other two corners are not really developable. This is the last one, and they expect to spend up to $6 million developing this corner. Casey's is a Midwest company with over 2,500 stores, over 40,000 employees. There is at your booklet that you've been provided with, by the way, at tab B, there's a little summary of the company if you'd like to read that. But I would tell you that they're very community-oriented. They've given millions of dollars to charity. They also allow every employee 2 paid days off to work for volunteer organizations. And when disaster strikes, they're among the first people to show up with food and water and everything else. They just recently did this in Ohio when they had some tornadoes over there. You will note that this project has received an unfavorable recommendation from the staff. And the sole reason for that, which is known, it's also set forth on the second paragraph of page 2. The sole reason for this is that it's in a 1-year time of travel, which is 1-year time of travel to the new public well fields. That's the only reason the staff is denying this recommendation. First, let me thank Mr. Prince for originally raising this issue. There's nothing in the public record that would determine that a developer came along, whether a particular site was in a 1-year time of travel, a wellhead protection area, et cetera. So we met with Mr. Prince. He advised us that, but again, for the fact that this was in a 1-year time of travel or wellhead protection area, he would vote in favor of it. But because of that factor, he would have to recommend denial. We then went to the County Health Department. At your tab, I think it's C4, Mishawaka has adopted an ordinance. That ordinance says that the wellhead protection program for the city of Mishawaka is administered by the County Health Department, not by the city of Mishawaka. So we met with the County Health Department, and they told us 2 things of interest. One is that if a well field is within 200 feet of a gas station, 200 feet, they would not approve it. Beyond that, is subject to whether or not the application is sufficient. Our site is between 1,700 and 2,000 feet from the nearest well, between 8.5 and 10 times farther away than the health department considers necessary. The other interesting fact that the health department advises of is the fact that this particular site is not in a wellhead protection area. I repeat, this is not in a wellhead protection area for the city of Mishawaka. At the time, we thought it would be, which is why we went to the County Health Department. Despite the fact that it's not in a wellhead protection area, Casey's made the corporate decision to apply the rules and standards as if it were in a wellhead protection area. We fully believe that by the time this property would be developed in a year or so, that this property would probably be in a wellhead protection area. So they wanted to do that. So we submitted our application to the County Health Department, and they have said that it is complete and accurate, and they're ready to issue the permit upon construction. So we've met the necessary requirements of the County Health Department to place a fuel station in a wellhead protection area, even though this is not in a wellhead protection area. So then it comes down to, it's in a 1-year time of travel. So notwithstanding the site is not in a wellhead protection area, it is within a 1-year time of travel. And what that means is the staff report points out that if a molecule of water became contaminated at the site, that within a year, it could reach the well, right? The mitigating circumstances, which we won't challenge the determination of the 1-year line. We won't challenge that, but I will say this. We believe that the 1-year time of travel is a non-issue. And I give you the following reasons for that conclusion. 1, the city, with full knowledge that Family Express was already there, located the city well field where they did. Family Express is also within a 1-year time of travel. There's a map that I provided to you along with your package that shows that we are 1,737 feet and maybe further from the well field. Family Express is actually closer. The city could have moved the well field because they knew Family Express was already there, already in existence. However, the city chose not to do that. The city chose to put the well field where it is, and that clearly indicates to us that they did not consider Family Express to be an unacceptable risk. So the very fact the city has put its well field, knowing it's within 1-year time of travel of an existing fuel center, mitigates the idea that a second fuel center, which is even farther away, it's going to be an additional risk. Secondly, at C6 of your package, there's something known as the Indiana Spill Rule. So Indiana has adopted a spill rule that says that if you are in a wellhead protection area, which, well, again, we're not, but if we were, any spill over 55 gallons on site has to be notified to the state within 2 hours by law, right? And there's criminal and civil consequences for not reporting a spill of over 55 gallons. Actually, because this is not a wellhead protection area, we could actually go to 1,000-gallon spill before we'd have to notify the state. But we're going to presume it's in a wellhead, and so 55 gallons will be the limit. 3, the federal government, which is also noted at page, I believe it's tab 7, in 2016, I spent a lot of my career doing what we used to call tank yanks and dealing with contamination from USTs and gas stations, the old ones. And by the way, they were designed to fail, right? They were designed to fail because they were made out of steel. They were single wall tanks, and inevitably would get water, and they would rust out, and they would contaminate the soil. Since 2016, the federal government has and requires all new tanks to have leak detection systems, not only for the tanks, but for the pressurized lines as well. At the back of page, or tab 1, there's actually about 3 pages in from the back. You can see how these tanks are built and put into the ground. We also have monitoring wells around these tanks. I'm going to hand you what a modern tank looks like. They're not made out of steel. They're made out of fiberglass, and they're what we call two-walled tanks. And you can see that as you look at it. In between both walls is another material called an interstitial material. And at C7, the EPA explains this. If anything were to penetrate that first fiberglass wall, before it gets to the second wall, these tanks automatically shut down and send an alarm. So it's automatic. And that's required by the EPA. They have to shut down the minute there's a leak from the inner tank to that area between before you even get to the outer tank. In addition, we have monitoring wells. So since 2016, all these USTs, all these pressurized pipes are up to standard, and that's what we have to install by law, by the US EPA regulations. Casey's has even a stronger system. They actually say if there's a 5-gallon spill, you have to notify. First of all, if a spill is not automatically indicated by a leaking tank or leaking pipe, just a spill on the ground, you can see at page or tab 7, I'm sorry, tab 8. There's a long litany of what happens if there's a spill greater than 5 gallons or greater than or less than 5 gallons, right? And any spill has to immediately be called into Casey's. They have a 24-hour team. This is a large corporation. They monitor and manage all these stores, and anytime there's any type of spill, not a leak, but any type of spill, they have to call into their own hotline. And there's training. Everybody's provided with kits. Even when they deliver gasoline to the tanks, they actually have a system where they take the vapor that comes. You've all smelled vapor when you fill up your gas tank. You smell that gasoline vapor. When they pump it into the tanks, they actually capture that vapor in their own system. So it's not put out into the atmosphere. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days, these tanks are monitored and managed by Casey's staff. In addition, because of EPA rules, they have automatic detection systems and leak protection. So even if one of these tanks somehow leaks through a double wall without the automatic tank, and even if it got past all the monitoring wells that are on site, it would be well known before a year would ever expire, right? By law, they have to notify the EPA, or the state of Indiana. They have to notify the county if there's a spill within the Wellhead Protection Agency area. So there are more than enough bells and whistles to protect the environment. And I go back to the fact that Family Express, which is located here, and by the way, is the same type of level of protection that Casey's would have. That is the double wall tanks, the automatic systems. The city felt comfortable enough to put the well field where it was, knowing that Family Express was within that 1 year time of travel. So for all these reasons, we would ask for your favorable recommendation to the council on this rezoning, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a couple of questions that I just want to start with. In my notes, it says, as identified previously when the Wellfield property was purchased, the Family Express was there prior to that. Is that not the case?
Family Express was there prior to the well field.
Prior.
Right, that's my point, is that it was already there when they put the well field where they did. And even though they knew the well field was within 1 year time of travel to Family Express, they still located it there, even though they knew it was in the same distance as this facility is going to be. So they came to that conclusion that it was an acceptable risk. Family Express was an acceptable risk already, because they were already there. And so we're actually a little farther away. And so we present no discernible additional risk to the well field, because the city's already accepted the risk that Family Express is there.
Right, I just wanted to validate
Right.
when that came
Family Express was
from
there first before the well
field.
field
My
was
second
developed.
question is, were you able to work with our staff and present that health department contradictory information that you had talked about? I mean, normally what we'd like to see is that you worked with the staff and you found some common ground and there's an approval, they recommend approval.
Absolutely.
But-
We did talk to staff immediately when we found out that this particular site and the Family Express are not within the wellhead protection area. We notified Mr. Prince of the fact that it's not in the wellhead protection area. We also notified him that despite that, we were going to act as if it were, and we're going to take the necessary precautions. And so we had filed our application with the county, and the county had accepted the application as complete and accurate. Now, what happens is that they don't actually issue the permit until construction is complete, right? So we have to build in accordance with what we've submitted to the health department. It begs the question, what happens if they don't give the permit? We can't open, right?
Right,
So-
and it's currently a C1, and is C1, I know it's problematic for Casey's, but
Right.
for that land, is C1 problematic for other buyers?
It is problematic. For one thing, so these are 2,500 stores. They all sell fuel. I don't know if you know this or not, kind of a little-known fact. They're the 5th largest seller of pizza in the country. The Wall Street Journal just ran an article on that, showing that they're one of the largest purveyors of pizza. They come in early. They provide all the food fresh. They really serve the workers that come in early and need food and fresh food. And with all the new people that are going to be showing up at the Mishawaka athletic facilities, people need food, they need gas, they need those types of services. And we're not going to go farther east. There's no place on Capitol Avenue to put them. We already have a fuel station at literally kitty corner from the site. And so this makes total sense for them to put a fuel station there. And this is their motto. If you've been to State Road 17 in Elkhart, they just put up a new one there. And so this is what they do, right? They sell fuel, they sell food, and they do a very good job of it. And they're very community-oriented.
Other questions? Yes?
I've got 3 for you.
Sure.
How far outside the perimeter of the wellhead protection area is this property?
Probably outside the wellhead protection area, a couple of miles.
It's a couple miles outside the wellhead
Yeah,
protection?
because there is no wellhead protection area for this well field yet.
Okay.
It's never been established. It will be, I'm sure, at some point, but it's not been established.
Is there an anticipated perimeter that you can kind of give us an idea of?
Right, so what the county told us, that if a wellhead protection area was established, that this station and Family Express would be within it, right? And if it's more than 200 feet away from the well, which were 1,700 to 2,000, and we met all the criteria set forth in the application, they would issue the permit. And so that's how the county manages these wellhead protection areas. There are a number of gas stations actually in the county that have never gone through the permit process. Casey's made the decision, though, even though we were not required to, they filed the application because they felt that even if it's not in a wellhead protection area, it is still a city well field. And they wanted to do everything extra they could, which is why they're also installing monitoring wells around their own tanks. So the city, I believe, doesn't even have any monitoring wells in the area, right? What the city generally would do is test the wells at the well field itself, at the site, right? Which is candidly probably too late. Casey's actually putting in monitoring wells around its own site.
So is it a fair statement to say that you would be within the anticipated wellhead protection area?
I would suspect, so the way that gets established is the city of Mishawaka actually provides paperwork to the county under the state law as to what constitutes a public well field, and what they determine an area around that as a well field area. I would suspect that within a one-year time of travel that we will be in it, which is why we took the extra steps to make the application with the health department.
Okay. And can you expand on the monitoring wells? I mean, are they the perimeter of the area? Are they right next to the tanks? How are they set up?
Yes, so there's the monitoring wells are also, so our tanks, as I said, you've got a copy of what it looks like, right? Mm-hmm. Those wells are buried, and you can see on the site plan, they're behind, I believe, you can see where they're located. Around those tanks, there'll be monitoring wells that if anything ever occurred beyond, if those tanks for whatever reason leaked and it wasn't caught automatically, that these other monitoring wells would pick it up, and they're monitored. I can find out how often they're checked. Do we know how often monitoring wells are?
Every 3 months.
Every 3 months. So we actually are doing more than I believe that the city of Mishawaka is actually doing in connection with the well field.
And my last question is the capture and containment of gas-contaminated runoff. I mean, we all fill our tanks and a little bit drips on the ground with every fill off, and it rains and it goes somewhere.
It does. So as typical of these, that they don't put them on asphalt because asphalt is pervious and things can leak down, so they put them on concrete. And they have collection systems to collect, and they have oil water separators that any rainwater that would wash any, we've all spilled a little bit filling up your motor gas can, whatever it is, at least I have, and others. So most of that evaporates. Gasoline is a very volatile product, evaporates very quickly. It's why you can smell those odors. But to the extent anything would ever spill, that's why in Casey's thing, it actually says if it's less than 5 gallons, that they have kits available to them to absorb that.
Sure.
And they're all trained on that. And so there's a number of redundancies built into the system, and they have to be. The consequences of a UST leaking nowadays or failing, they're almost impossible to do that. My concern is with the older stations that haven't installed the fiberglass tanks, the dual wall tanks. They don't have their automatic systems. They don't have the monitoring wells. We still have a lot of those. I don't have any concern, and I've been practicing environmental law for a great number of years. I don't have any concern with the new tanks, nor does the federal government, right? As long as they follow these rules. It's the older tanks, the older gas stations, I think, that present a particular problem. But tanks built after 2016, which is now 8 years ago, all have to meet these standards. So the EPA is hoping over time, as these tanks are removed and replaced, we're going to come up to standard.
Sure. And you mentioned environmental law. Can you expand on your credentials and what you do?
Sure. A little embarrassing, but I actually represented the city of Mishawaka and all of its Uniroyal demolition, as well as the Studebaker demolition. I've been a best lawyer, super lawyer, environmental and real estate for over a dozen years. I've taught environmental law. I've taught numerous courses, and there's probably very few environmental. We've also represented the city of Mishawaka, for instance, when they had the problem with Cam Island, trying to build Cam Island, somebody questioned whether it was a right to review. So I've been doing environmental law now for over 20 years, and I hate to say I'm the dean of environmental law because it makes me feel older than I am, and I'm pretty old. So Mr. Cash can attest to that. So, but my practice has been principally environmental law and real estate, commercial real estate development.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Other questions? Woody?
Yes. In your presentation here, you mentioned that Casey
has a convenience store and a fuel center. Can the convenience store run independently and not have a fuel center? Since you've made the statement that with the athletic center being built, that people need food.
Right. And they need
They
fuel.
don't know if they need fuel. So what I'm saying is, could they build the convenience store and not the fuel center? Would it be profitable for them?
I don't think they would do that. I think that the investment here is clearly, it's a synergy. Mr. Snyder here has 12 or 13 facilities, including in Elkhart and other places. They bring fuel in. It's a national program. I think you're asking them to change their business model to say, like, could Apple not sell iPhone, but sell computers? Could they? Yes, but would it be profitable for them? Would they want to do that? No. So as a business decision, when we look at where locations of fuel centers, you want to be where the people traffic is, right? And I've done a number of fuel centers. I've done the one up on State Road 23 and Douglas. We've done them all over. We've done up the Family Express. You may or may not know that I represented Family Express before the well field was here, right? And we got that approved through the council, that was an appropriate use and a site for a fuel center and a convenience store. This is also appropriate. The only concern here, is, from my perspective, is whether or not we present a risk to the well field. And I think we've taken beyond every normal and usual consideration to make sure that nothing ever happens. And as I said, the city, I think, at least the city water department, would have to agree because they located the well field here knowing that Family Express was already within that one-year time of travel. But I think they were comforted by the fact that Family Express has the same type of special tanks, monitoring systems, 24-hour monitoring. So, these don't present the problems that our grandfathers. My grandfather, by the way, was a Phillips 66 jobber for many, many years, right? And I can tell you that he would take extra fuel oil and dump it on county roads to get the dust down. Nobody would do that nowadays, right? Nobody would take gasoline and dump it on a roadway. So we have changed. We've learned a lot. And that's why I think the EPA, and there's a tab in here, I think it's tab 7, that talks about up to 16, all the requirements that are mandated by the EPA. And we have to follow those. And we also have to follow the law of the spill rule in Indiana. So if there's a spill, we have to notify by law the state within 2 hours. And actually, interesting enough, in the regulation, it's Indiana Administrative Code, they provide not only a 1-800 number for local, but for out of state, because I recognize a lot of these companies are out of state, so they provide a number that within 2 hours you have to notify them. Casey's goes further. Every spill of any type has to be called into the system.
I understand that, but like you say, what the administration is saying, they need to protect the well field. I mean, if that becomes contaminated, we're in deep trouble. And the more gas stations that are built around that well field, the more the potential is to have a leakage and contaminate the well field.
Well, again, I think that...
What I'm saying is I can understand the administration's point of view that, hey, there is one there. Do we need to put more in and more and having the option of, or the thing of one of them springing a leak and contaminating that well field? Because if it gets contaminated, the city of Mishawaka is in deep trouble. And so I think the city is looking down the road so that they don't have a problem down the road and that. And so maybe it wasn't wise to put the one in there now, but now that we're looking at the possibility of another one coming in, and then maybe another one to come in, because there's 4 corners there, and that, and where do we stop? Now, did we make a mistake on the first one? Maybe we did. And maybe now we need to look at correcting that situation by not adhering another filling station. That's why I asked if he would just a convenience store and not a gas station would be acceptable.
Right, and I can't answer that, unfortunately, that's a business decision, but I can say this, is that the 1-year time of travel, which we haven't challenged because there's a question about whether that is accurate or not, but we'll accept that as it is, but you have a number of other gas stations, including Costco and a number of other gas stations within 5 that you've allowed. So at one, obviously I didn't do a very good job of convincing you that these tanks are next to impossible to leak. They cannot leak, right? And the city accepted that risk when they put the well field where they did because they already knew Family Express within one. You can argue that, well, 2 is worse than 3 and 3 is worse than 4, whatever you want to argue, but there's already a number of gas stations in this area. We are across a 4-lane highway from the well field. We have monitoring tanks. So I didn't do a very good job of convincing you, obviously, that there's no way these tanks nowadays, these tanks can leak. And certainly they can't leak and not be discovered for a year. And by the way, as part of what I've done in the past, I can tell you that generally groundwater runs to the river. There's a mitigating factor here, whether there's a zone, what we call a zone of influence. When you have a well field, right, it draws water from outside into a zone. And at the same time, you have mitigating factors say that the general groundwater can go different directions. And we haven't looked at any of that because we felt comfortable with the fact that these tanks are going to leak. We have programs and systems in place to protect the well fields. And the well field isn't even in a wellhead protection area.
Well, like I say, I understand all the protection,
Right.
but nothing's infallible. I mean, always something can happen in that. So nothing is perfect in this world.
I agree.
We try to be perfect, but nothing is perfect in this world. So I appreciate
Thank you.
your presentation and answering my questions. Thank you.
Other questions, Ms.
I
Cameron?
just want, your representation, that is the 1-year time of travel. True or false? Up there, or there, either way.
Are we within a 1-year time of travel?
That's the 1-year time of travel, is that not?
According to that map, yes, we are.
That is not. There's also a 5 and there's also a 10.
That's correct.
Beyond that,
Right.
we have to be very careful as a city to figure out how you manage your stormwater runoff in 1 year, 5-year, and 10-year. Just want you all to know that's in the most critical ring is the 1-year time of travel.
But can I respond to that?
Sure.
So what I don't know is whether the city used the arbitrary radio distance. Did they use an analytical method? I don't know how we got 1-year time of travel. We're accepting in good faith
That's-
that we are with there. So by that map, we are there. I don't know that necessarily agree that we're in the 1-year time of travel. We're accepting it for purposes of this discussion because we believe, since it's not in the wellhead protection area, that even if we are in a 1-year time of travel, so is Family Express. And with Family Express being there, the city well field would put there even though Family Express was also there.
Well, you know how those are delineated. Peerless Midwest delineated that because of the design of that.
I know.
So
But the
it's-
EPA recognizes 5 separate methods, and I just don't know which one they used.
That has well established. And the county has it at this, and I don't know how that got between your discussion and today. Then they recognize that. So, that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you.
I'd like to just clarify one thing with our executive director. Do you intend, I have some questions for the staff on this denial. Do you intend to come up and speak during the oppose?
I really wanted to respond. I think the staff report stands on its own, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission has.
Okay. Well, why don't we finish questioning here, and then we'll turn our questions to you, if you don't mind, Mr.
Not at all.
Prince. Okay.
Anything else?
Any other questions? Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for the material you put together.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.
Any questions for our executive director on this statement and clarifying any material that's on here and their reasons for denial?
I would like more clarification on Family Express and why the well field wasn't positioned further away, and what our concern is about Family Express fueling station, why it's there and Casey's would be right there. So what's different with this?
So that you can imagine the challenge of locating a well field. So that 1-year time of travel, as I indicated in the staff report, represents about a 450-acre area. So how do you find a 450-acre in the city that doesn't have any potential risk associated with it? So we knew, as Mr. Studer represented, that there was an associated risk with Family Express going in there, but there's also a known risk with the St. Joseph County fueling facility located further to the north off of Cleveland Road that also has a salt contamination issue that we looked at extensively with Peerless Midwest. And part of the rationale of locating the well field where it was exactly what Mr. Studer referenced in terms of how do you position that well field. We took all of those factors into consideration as well as the well production itself, and that's how we arrived at the location. So the tanks located up at the county well field are worse than the Family Express tanks. There's also a risk, I would say, in terms of the railroad and the toll road located there. If we have a tanker spill or if something happened in Ohio, these are the risks that you take. And the issue, and I commend Mr. Studer for representing his client and walking through it, but these are exactly the reason why we're recommending denial. You can say you need monitoring wells. Why do you need monitoring wells? Because there's a risk. Why do they have an extra standard of 5 gallons versus 55 gallons versus 2,000 gallons? Is because there's a risk. And is it a big risk? How big when you're talking about serving 50,000 people with clean water and spending $40 million on something that you can't pick up and relocate? You can shut down a gas station. And in terms of the comment that Mr. Studer made from the County Board of Health, the reason this is not in a wellhead protection yet, the wells are not even going active until later this week. After an 8-year process, the wells are coming online at the end of this week. This is a question of logistics relative to the wellhead protection area. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when it goes in. And this is not an environmental issue, this is a zoning issue. So the question that is up before this planning commission and ultimately the common council are the 5 state Indiana code reference provisions that you have to find findings for. So those findings are regarding the comprehensive plan. They're regarding the current conditions and character of the current structures in each district. Well, that goes to Family Express, right? That didn't exist, but now the well field does exist for what Casey's is proposing. The most desirable use for which the land in the district is adopted, again, is a gas station the most desirable use for that property, given that the well field is within the 1-year time of travel. Conservation of property values throughout the jurisdiction, again, it goes back to the well field, and the responsible development and growth of the area. Again, knowing that this is in the 1-year time of travel, and to Mr. Studer's point, if this is not an additional risk, why don't we put one right at the intersection of Veterans Parkway and Douglas Road? It's approximately the same distance from the well field. At what point do we say, no, that additional risk is not acceptable for the well field? And as was noted, we're just talking about the 1 year, the most critical area of the time of travel. We're not talking about the 5-year or the 10-year or the additional areas that could you take into consideration. And I made a point of copying in the staff report the conditions that were placed when we released back the golf course to the golf course operator. We have provisions in there protecting the well field. When the Penn property, when we put the well field there, we have provisions that prevent any underground storage tank from going in there. We put it in there as part of the PUD. When the auto mall, which you're going to hear have heard regarding the auto mall, we specifically identified that no filling stations were, and that's outside of the 1-year time of travel, would be located on that property. So why would it be appropriate for the additional risk to be located here? And again, we're talking about from a zoning perspective. And in terms of the environmental risk, talking about the County Board of Health, if they have a 200-foot setback required, just for perspective, the well field that we had to close off of Burkett was about 1,000 feet from where the leak occurred. So 5 times the distance, and that shut down that well field, and we were compensated over $8 million for shutting down that well field as a result of the MTBE. So again, I completely respect Mr. Studer in terms of his knowledge and expertise, but I would say that the 20 minutes that he spent explaining the protections is exactly why this should be denied, is because of that additional risk.
Thank you for your clarification.
Yep.
I appreciate that, and you'll get a chance for right of rebuttal as I progress through this. Is there anybody else in the room wishing to speak in favor of petition 24-05? Is there anybody online wishing to speak in favor of petition 24-05? Hearing none, is there anybody wishing to speak in opposition of petition 24-05, either in the room or online? In the room, come on up.
Good evening to you all. My name's Michael Cook. This is my wife, Tia Cook. We live at the property just next door to these parcels that want to be rezoned.
Okay, let's take a look where that's at.
We live at
Give us your exact
13,000
address.
Douglas Road.
Oh, did you give us your address?
15,000 Douglas Road,
15,000 Douglas Road. So you are where?
Right next door.
right next door. First parcel.
it.
Yep,
Right there.
yep.
Okay. Summarize why you're in denial of this, or you're speaking against this rezone from C1 to C10 filling station.
Well, citing health and safety concerns, quality of life concerns, and financial concerns. It definitely would not be in my best interest to want a gas station or filling station of any kind next door to me. I do appreciate the gentleman's explanations of all the safety protocols that they go through with these containers. However, with all the modern-day infrastructure, we see failures every day of infrastructure. They wouldn't have all the protocols for handling spills set up in place if these containers didn't fail from time to time. I myself am on a property that does have a personal well. My neighbors also have personal wells. So for me, this would be very dangerous. Also, being on that corner, it's going to bring a lot of noise pollution, lighting, quality of life deterioration for me. When I go into more of the financial aspect of it, just recently we had our property taxes increased by 183%. So in the same year that I'm going to see 183% property tax increase, I'm also going to see a house devaluation from having a filling station put right next door to me. Also, the practicality of this, I don't quite understand the need for another filling station. Within 1.2 miles of our house, there's already 12 filling stations. Within 2 miles. So there's already 12 filling stations in
Yeah,
very
that's not
close
for this,
proximity.
that's not for this body to decide. That's for the open market to decide.
Okay.
We're just deciding, does that piece of property, should it be a C10 filling station, yes or no?
No.
I absolutely
that's
do not
what we're
agree,
voting on.
mainly on the safety and security of
Gotcha.
of residents in the area. I'm not a rich man. I don't own the well field across the street. I can't speak for them. I can't speak for everybody in Mishawaka. But I can say that this is a concern for me. It's a concern for some of my neighbors. I was the only one to receive a notice because we had to be within 300 feet of the affected parcel. So none of my other neighbors even knew that this was happening today.
And we just received this letter on Thursday.
You know, we just received this letter. I've had very little time between work and everything else, just 2 or 3 business days to get my nervous speech together to kind of pitch to you guys and hope for some favor. I thank you for your time,
Yeah.
and hopefully this goes.
We really
good for us.
appreciate citizens coming out like this and taking the time on this beautiful day to come in and speak your
Not a problem. Well, thank you
concerns.
very much.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Yep.
Are you on a septic system?
Yes, we are.
Are all the homes in that area on septic systems?
Yes.
Yes, they are.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
She did. Yep, she did. Is there anybody else in the room wishing to speak in opposition of petition 24-05? Is there anybody online wishing to speak in opposition to petition 24-05? Is there any remonstrance letters or any additional information, Mr. Spear?
No further information.
Right of rebuttal by the petitioner?
Thank you. I did want to add, by the way, that this project will be bringing Mishawaka City utilities to the site, so it should benefit neighbors as well, because they'll have sewer and water available to them at that point in time. But let me respond to a couple comments that were made. You know, regarding the conditions for rezoning, the staff itself found in favor of all 5 conditions. On the last 2 pages, they did say, for instance, that the proposed change to filling station commercial is desirable given that there's already a fueling station convenience store located across the street. The proposed change is responsible development and growth. As you know, the staff is responsible for giving both a favorable and unfavorable. And we rely on the favorable, obviously, because these are things that we think are demonstrated by the petition. But I'm a little bit concerned about the idea that we spend a lot of time on the environmental. The reason we did that is because in the staff report, it was underscored, the sole reason the staff is against this is because of environmental issues, because of the 1-year time of travel. And for us to say, well, we're putting all these extra protections in, that's a really disingenuous argument. That would be like saying, well, we don't think you're going to have a crash. Let's not put seatbelts in. Now let's put brakes in cars, because if you do that, you obviously recognize there's a risk of driving. Same thing here. We could say, we're not going to put these specialized tanks in that are required by the federal government. We're not going to do any of that stuff. We have to do that, first of all. But if we said we weren't going to do it, just to demonstrate that we weren't concerned, that wouldn't be a very logical argument to say, well, we're not going to put any special techniques here. We're not going to put any, we're going to put thin steel wall tanks in here because we don't believe there's going to be risk. We take these extra precautions to ensure and give the public confidence that there's not going to be a problem. So it's a little disingenuous to say, well, we're spending all this time, therefore there's a risk. Would it be more logical for us to say we're not going to do anything because we don't believe there's a risk? No. We're looking at this and saying we're doing everything the federal government and the state requires us to do, and we're also doing everything that a wellhead, we have to do in a wellhead protection area, even if it's not. We said we're going to do that anyway. So we don't really care whether or not it should have been already or not and going to be in one. We're treating it as it is in a wellhead protection area, which is why we filed the application. So I'm a little concerned about the idea that, well, because we're spending time on this, we're making a bigger deal than it is. I don't think anybody on the commission would have been happy if I came up here and said, we don't think it's an environmental issue, so we're not going to do anything, right? We're trying to explain to you that we're doing everything required by the federal government, by the state government, by the county health department, in accordance with the wellhead protection area, and those have to be established by state law. We're doing everything, and we're doing extra things to make sure that there's not going to be a problem in the future. We already have, as Mr. Prince acknowledged, the toll road, railroad. We have lots of potential risks here, much, much greater than this risk, substantially, exponentially greater than a potential risk of this. And so that's why we think a fuel station here should get a favorable recommendation. We are not presenting a problem here. We're trying to bring $6 million of investment, bring city utilities here, and provide services along a very, very busy arterial street with over 14,000 people a day traveling. And that's why we're here. So I hope that answers any questions you might have had.
Thank you. Is there any questions on the right of rebuttal?
Are you adding the monitoring because of its location, or is that standard procedure for your company?
Standard procedure for us. We do it every station. They just go the extra mile because this is what they do, right?
Do you have any statistics on, I mean, how many stations are in the chain?
We have 2,500 stations, and it's all in the Midwest, all the way from north to south. The regional manager has 13 stations. They just put a recent one over in Elkhart, right along State Road 17. A very nice station, very similar to what's going to be built here.
And of those
2,500,
what incidents of leaks have you had within your organization?
Zero.
Zero. Within what period of time?
I've been in the business since the 1980s, and these tanks are just...
Mr. President.
Sir, can we have you come to the microphone?
Thank you.
And we'll get your name and address for the record.
Oh, there you go. I was going to take it home.
Good evening. My name is Richard McMahon. I'm with Casey's. My address is 5412 Regents Park Road, Rockford, Illinois. Came down to say hello. I've been in the business since 1981 and began pulling old tanks out of the ground with Phillips Petroleum Company, where they were metal, and some of them would come out looking like they had been put in the day before, but the majority of them came out looking like you could put your finger through them, and many of them did. I was instrumental in how we as a company nationwide started to recover contaminated soil around those. My undergraduate degree is in biology, so I'm kind of tuned into that, and my daughter is the American Birding Association's Young Birder of the Year for 2000, so I'm very environmentally tuned in. There is no record of any of these tanks having leaked, as the last time I've talked to construction people. And the void in the middle here between the two layers of the tank is monitored, this interstitial space. And if any liquid gets in, say water, from the outside, if there was a crack on the outside, the alarm inside this would go off and immediately turn everything off. If gasoline got into the interstitial space from the inside, it would do the same thing, right? Everything gets turned off, and you just can't do business then.
Excuse me, but I do want to limit the right of rebuttal to answering the questions.
Okay, I'm
And
sorry.
We kind of went through that already
right.
in the presentation, but thank you very much for answering
If
the
I can
question.
expand on that then.
Yeah.
But no tanks have leaked.
No tanks have leaked.
Can you tell me about the preparation of the ground around that tank? Is there any special, membrane or something around that tank?
No, not in this case, it would not be, but the people who install the tanks, they're not just contractors, they're people who have to attend classes and get certified for this. And the soil that is put in around the tanks is special soil to make sure that there's nothing that could ever rub up against it, say a piece of gravel or something.
And you said you have 2,500 stations.
Yes, sir.
So on an average, how many tanks do you have within your chain?
I would say approximately 2 tanks per store.
Okay, so you're talking 5,000 tanks, and you've experienced 0 leaks since the chain was,
With the tanks?
With those tanks?
With these tanks, yes.
okay.
That
Thank
that
you.
I know of. I don't know of any others.
Oh, we have a follow-up question.
Two questions. One, how long is this tank designed to last? And two, is there a third party monitoring the leakage, or is it Casey's monitoring it?
I don't know off the top of my head the warranty on these. I don't know. So I can't answer that
Because
question.
the wellhead's
But-
going to be here, and the water from Mishawaka will be here in all of our lifetimes, 100 years, maybe. At what point are these being replaced? And I think that's an important question. And then again, who's the party that's monitoring them, should they get compromised?
I don't know, how long the tanks will be in the ground compared to the lifetime of your thing. Maybe in 20 years, we won't be selling gasoline because everybody will be working off of hydrogen
Tanks will
or
still be there.
electricity.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how to answer that question.
And the monitoring?
The monitoring. We have if one of these leaks goes off, they hear about it electronically in Ankeny. So there's a 24-hour right there. And plus these monitors, they're constantly testing the pressure in the lines all day, 24 hours a day.
Great. Thank you all
Thank
for the right of rebuttal. And with that, I'm going to close the public hearing and open it up for any commissioners that wish to speak on this and what they're thinking, or I will entertain a motion on this. Reminder, this does go to the council for the final vote. So we are just recommending a favorable or unfavorable.
Well, I would like to say that Mishawaka's water is its heart and gold underground. I think we all that live here in Mishawaka over the years value the quality of our water and the fine job the Mishawaka Water Department does in maintaining that quality is incredible. And my biggest concern is keeping that for generations to come. Because there are no restrictions on it today, does not mean there's going to be restrictions on it in a week or month or 6 months. I believe there will be, and if they're not, in a year's time, which most likely that will be enough time to go through, and there are no restrictions, then build away. But I believe we have to protect our water, even though we know Family Express was there beforehand. Mishawaka's hands are tied. We don't have the luxury of plopping a piece of property out where there's no risk. But adding risk is what we're talking about.
Any other comments from the commissioners before I call for a motion?
I do.
Mr. Portelis.
I'm not sure if to talk myself into this or out of it, but listening to everything tonight, Douglas Road is planned to be a major thoroughfare, which means there's going to be a lot of development. And they're going to run right through this area. Fast food, who knows? Car washes, filling stations, who knows? There are several wellheads in Mishawaka, And I'm sure that some of them are within the proximity of fuel stations, correct?
This one,
Others?
I did not pull the others, but I would assume, yes.
Okay.
So you look at the golf course and you look at Burkett and Lincoln Way, there's a gas station, so I haven't measured that proximity. but-
Right.
Right.
You know, technology's been my world for the last 30-some years. And can this world survive with zero risk? There's risk for us walking out to the parking lot right now. We have monitoring, we have good neighbors, we have an area that's going to blossom. And to shoot the first one down, yes, the wellhead is important. I drink the water. You know, yes, we had to shut a well down because of a leaking station. That was 20 years ago, I believe, and was probably a steel tank. We've learned from our mistakes, and we move forward. But I think this is just the first dot on what's going to become a major thoroughfare with a lot of development. Each one of those properties is going to carry a risk. And with that, I'm going to see how I vote when it comes down the line. But I really think we need to consider what's happening in that area in its totality, not in that island.
Any other comments from the commissioners before I call for a motion on this?
Could I add something?
Sure.
I understand and appreciate the technology and the underground tanks. But this is more of folks that are using the facility, filling up those 5-gallon buckets for their lawnmowers, their snow blowers. And every drop that is spilled, it's gathered by stormwater management for the site. And it has to be managed on site. And it's not appropriate yet when at this conversation, if it gets to site plan, they have not answered how they're going to manage the wellhead protection of a 1-year time of travel on that site. Those questions are still out there. We've asked for them. We have not gotten them. So it's bigger than what's buried. It's surface water. It's the act of filling that car, the 5-gallon bucket. And our water is priceless.
Any other comments from the commissioners before I call for a motion? Then I call for a motion on petition 24-05 to either approve or deny, which would go to the council, and they would have the final vote on this.
No.
I would like to make a motion to deny petition 24-05.
So we have a motion to deny. Do we have a second?
I have a second, 24-05.
We have a motion and a second to deny. And Krista, would you please call for the vote, saying yes is confirming the unfavorable rating, and the quorum is 5 votes needed.
Chris Jamrose,
Yes.
Drew Cash,
Yes.
Woody Emmons,
Yes.
Drew Johnson,
Yes.
Randy Frost,
No.
Kathleen White-Gadich,
Yes.
Michael Porterlees,
No.
Chris Torty.
Yes, I'd like to clarify your vote. You voted, are you for it or against it?
Against.
Then you would
vote
say yes to the
Denial.
vote that went through.
I make a motion to recall the vote.
Yes, let's recall the vote.
And a yes is
A yes is
Supporting-
voting for the unfavorable rating.
supporting the unfavorable
Correct.
recommendation.
So let's recall the vote.
Chris Jamrose,
Yes.
Drew Cash,
Yes.
Woody Emmons,
Yes.
Drew Johnson,
Yes.
Randy Frost,
No.
Kathleen White-Gadich,
Yes.
Michael Porterlees,
No.
Chris Torty.
Yes. And there's 5 votes for,
6-2.
yep, an unfavorable rating is how that will move forward. Thank you very much for your time, your petition, and good luck at the council. And I appreciate your supporting information as well. It was very helpful. Thank you. Moves us to the next item on the agenda, petition 24-06. This is also going to go to the council for a favorable or unfavorable rating. It is a request submitted by 120 BS LLC requesting to rezone from R1 Single Family Residential to C1 General Commercial for a restaurant with a drive-through located at 415 Bittersweet Road. Hi.
Good evening. My name is George Lepignotis, attorney with Creek DeVault, offices at 4101 Edison Lakes Parkway, Mishawaka, Indiana. I represent the petitioner on the zoning request. This is truly a two-part request, but before we get there, I wanted to walk you through a presentation. If we could get the slides up. You have them before you as well. I provided them in hard copy. Jimmy John's, the franchise that is known as Freaky Fast, is asking for you to quickly approve a variance. Sorry, I won't make many more of those jokes. But the property in question is located at 415 Bittersweet Road, just south of Vistula, near Everwise Credit Union has a branch there, and catty corner to the Martins development on Bittersweet. Next slide, please. The property currently sits as R1 residential. This is its condition from the south. It is an unkept parcel. It has not been resided in for a number of years. Next slide, please. From the north, you can see the structure. I believe it to be a pre-manufactured double-wide home. It is in rough shape. It is surrounded, as I said, on the south by Everwise Credit Union. Next slide, please. It is on the west by a residential property that is long and rectangular. The portions of that residential property that abut on this property, if you'll notice, are 4 appurtenant buildings for that property, or pole barns or sheds toward the very back end of the property, and then some woods. To the north is another residential property that is also not well used. I'm not sure if someone is actually living to the north. We held a community event for the Near North Neighborhood Watch Group at the Mishawaka Fire Station number 4. And despite the chief not letting us bring them sandwiches, all of the community we had about 20 folks in attendance, including the neighbor to the west. We gave the neighbor to the north a number of notices of the meeting, and they did not attend. The neighbor to the west started unsure as to how he felt about the project, but by the end of the day, as we explained the plan, which I will do to you here in a moment, he was favorable and in favor of the development. So, next slide, please. This is our draft site plan. It's a preliminary site plan. The engineers would flesh this out and do more detail upon your approval. We designed this site to be a drive-through restaurant. Now, you may be wondering, why are we applying for a C1 with a special use permit as opposed to your C7 commercial zoning district? And that was because staff had some concerns about the site. The site is very unique in that, number one, it's a small site, even for a residential property. Number two, you will see on the site plan there's a diagonal dashed line. There is an overhead power line on this site, and there is a power line easement that limits where you can build. That is actually one of the borders of it. It's a little bigger than even this site. So this site does not have characteristics that would lead it to ever be redeveloped as a residential home. No one's going to build a house under power lines, I doubt. And it even has limits as far as commercial use, and staff had concerns about that. What they really had concerns about is in the future, if it was C7, a high queue drive-through, such as Starbucks or McDonald's, might take over use of the property, and that could create traffic concerns out onto Bittersweet. A low queue use like Jimmy John's, because you are in a Jimmy John's drive-through for so little time, the average cars queuing at Jimmy John's are much less than they would be at a Starbucks or a McDonald's or even a bank. So I think that the queuing was the concern, so we went with this route and agreed to staff's recommendation for the C1 change with the special use request, which, by the way, was approved by the BZA conditionally earlier today, conditioned on your approval of the change in zoning. Next slide, please. This is a blown-up of the site plan. Just did want to point out that at the BZA, the conditional approval of the special use portion of this did include 5 conditions by staff. I have one of the owners of the Jimmy John's franchisee here with me, Nick Venzen, and Nick was very happy to agree to the 5 conditions, one of which was that he actually extend the sidewalk all the way to the north to Vistula, beyond his property and all the way to that corner, to help create a walking path throughout what is becoming an increasingly busy commercial corridor. Staff were concerned that the residential owners of that site to the north would never get around to it. There's no requirement. And so my client agreed to that without argument. The others are that we have certain setbacks, opaque fencing, landscaped areas that are appropriate. In fact, the area to the west would have a 25-foot setback with landscaping in it of continuous 6-foot at planting hedgerow to block and shield that residential neighbor from any noise or discomfort. Next slide, please. This is an example of a standalone Jimmy John's. This one is in Mishawaka. It is on McKinley across from the car dealer. It is as you can tell, I don't know when Google took this picture. I did not take it, Google did, but it looks to be midday and it's not very trafficked. That's what makes this use appropriate for this small site with its challenges. Next slide, please. I've also given you some other standalones. This one's in South Bend on Portage Road, out by the Myers there, out off of Cleveland Road. It is an older design for Jimmy John's. They've gone away from the taupes and the browns, although they have, we understand that Mishawaka has some architectural standards that will be adhered to during the building permit process. Next slide, please. This is another standalone up in Benton Harbor, Michigan. This one just gives you a sense of a little bit more of their modern store. This one's a bit too white for Mishawaka standards. There would need to be some additional natural materials to offset the white. There's some limitations on that color. But it does give you a sense, again, of very low queuing, which is important to city planners, that the traffic doesn't spill out onto Bittersweet. Next slide. This Jimmy John's franchisee, as I mentioned, Nick is with me. Nick and his brother own the company. They own a number of Jimmy John's in central Indiana. They moved here from Illinois. Both the brothers moved to Granger, live in and around the stores. They're very committed to the area. And as you can tell, most of the Jimmy John's that we've eaten at, they own. Next slide. I wanted to bring about some just general ways in which they participate in their communities. They recently donated over $7,500 of food for Habitat for Humanity as they were doing building projects and getting volunteers, making sure they were fed. The same for the Logan Center, Memorial Hospital, the Sunburst, Big Brothers Big Sisters, as well as numerous schools and nonprofits. They're quick to be a part of the community and are always looking for ways to participate. Next slide. As I mentioned, the Twin Branch neighborhood had a meeting on March 20, 2024. They were kind enough to allow us to present along with council members who were present. Ken was present, Mr. Prince was present, and we had a nice discussion about the store and what it would look like. Their concerns were that we match existing fencing, which was already in the plan, that it's an opaque wood-type fence, and that at that site, there really was no remonstrance, except for the fact that the fire chief wouldn't let us bring in food. Next slide, please. With that, that is the end of my presentation, but I will say that you have the staff report in front of you. It is a favorable recommendation. We believe that the 5 state criteria that you must use to look at the change in zoning have been met. It would be good for property values. That Bittersweet corridor is becoming more dense. A sandwich shop like Jimmy John's serves the school system, teachers, children who are looking for something to eat quickly. We believe it really is fitting in the neighborhood, and even the residential property owners agreed at the neighborhood meeting that this would probably increase their property values, not decrease it, especially with some of the environmental conditions like the power lines. So, yes, sir.
Question. The driveway on the south, is that going in Everwise?
So staff asked us, as part of our conditions for the special use, to allow for currently calling it a cross-access agreement. Everwise is under no obligation to agree to that because they're not asking for anything. They already exist. But we happen to know the attorney who helps represent Everwise, and we've been under discussions with them about a cross easement there to keep traffic interior. Yes.
Sure. And then comment, should this pass, if Jimmy John's is into the community as it would appear, they may want to partner with the Mishawaka Food Pantry.
Sure.
As they are an organization, so you know, that provides food to the underserved right across the street here.
I think he just said we can do that.
And I'd like to make a comment. I was at the BZA meeting where you presented as well, and I really appreciate that you met with the Twin Branch Neighborhood Watch group. And I did want to tell my commissioners that when you presented, there was no opposition, and you had no remonstrance letters against that. Usually when we see something go from R1 to something else, there's, people that have heartburn over it, but you did it the right way.
I appreciate it.
And I appreciate you working with the staff on the conditional variance as well. I think that's going to work out good.
I echo your comments. I think it's terrific that you met with the residents out there, and that's just the way to do it. So that was great.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I just can't give enough credit to Council Member Hazen, as well as Council Member
Mamalenti.
Yeah, Mamalenti. Sorry, I had a brain. Who organized it and invited us and allowed us to take over their meeting. So thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Great, thank you for the presentation, and I really appreciate the material you put together for such a nice presentation. Is there anybody else in the room or online wishing to speak in favor of petition 24-06? Hearing none, is there anybody in the room or online wishing to speak in opposition to petition 24-06? Mr. Spear, any additional information?
No further information.
Then I'll close the public hearing, and I will ask for a motion on this from the commissioners.
Make a motion to approve.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second. Did you get
Who
that?
was the second?
Drew.
Okay. I can't see everyone.
Drew.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm hiding.
Please call for the vote.
Thank you. Chris Jamrose?
Yes.
Drew Cash?
Yes.
Woody Evans?
Yes.
Drew Johnson?
Yes.
Randy Frost?
Yes.
Kathleen White-Gadich?
Yes.
Mike Portelease?
Yes.
Chris Torty?
Yes, and petition 24-06 will move to the council with a favorable rating. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Brings us to the next item, which is Plat 24-04, a request submitted by Helen M. Segerman Estate and First Source Bank Continental 764 Fund LLC seeking approval of the one-lot Beacon Parkway minor subdivision.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jordan Teichen. I'm here tonight on behalf of Continental Properties, the multifamily housing developer proposing a 280-unit community here at the northeast corner of Beacon Parkway and Fur Road. We were at the Planning Commission last month seeking approval for our site plan. We did indeed receive approval here. We're here this evening seeking approval for a minor subdivision plat. As part of our process for this development, dating back to earlier this year and late last fall, we annexed the northernmost parcel here, just over 13 acres, into the city of Mishawaka, and with that rezoned to S2 PUD. With this plat request, we would be combining those two parcels, and in addition to that would be dedicating a water easement to the city of Mishawaka, placing a stormwater easement over a portion of an existing pond in the southeast corner of the property. And then in addition to that, there are existing easements on the property as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to you guys. If you have any questions, happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the room or on the line wishing to speak in favor of Plat 24-04? Hearing none, is there anybody in the room or online wishing to speak in opposition to Plat 24-04? Mr. City Planner, is there any additional information?
No further information.
I'll close the public hearing, and I'll ask the commissioners for a motion.
I motion to approve Plat 24-04.
Second.
We have a motion. The second was Woody. Krista, would you please call for the vote?
Chris Jamrose.
Yes.
Drew Cash.
Yes.
Woody Evans.
Yes.
Drew Johnson.
Yes.
Randy Frost.
Yes.
Kathleen Whitegadich.
Yes.
Michael Porterlies.
Yes.
Chris Torty.
Yes, and Plat 24-04 passes. Brings us to the next item. Thank you for the presentation. Replat 24-02, a request submitted by 1635 Ironwood LLC, Ronak Patel, seeking approval of the one-lot Capital 12 PUD minor subdivision replat. Hello.
Hi there, Steve Ruby, M. Marsh Consulting, 315 West Jefferson, South Bend, Indiana, representing the petitioner here. As we presented before, this is a PUD that was amended to allow for a C-store at this location. As a result of the C-store, they are adjusting the drainage boundaries and limits. This basin that you see in the northwest corner here is a joint basin that is accepting both stormwater runoff from the adjacent scooters that was recently built, as well as the frontage road that services the scooters facility and what will service this C-store location. So with that, we're seeking to expand the basin area with an increased easement to service that stormwater runoff, and that is why we are asking for the additional replat for this. Any questions?
Questions for Mr. Ruby? Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Is there anybody in the room or online wishing to speak in favor of replat 24-02? Hearing none, is there anybody online or in the room wishing to speak in opposition to replat 24-02? Mr. City Planner, any additional information?
No further information.
Then I'll close the public hearing, and I will call for a motion on replat 24-02.
I make a motion to approve replat 2402.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Second was Mike Porterlies. Krista, would you please call for the vote?
Chris Jamrose.
Yes.
Drew Cash.
Yes.
Woody Evans.
Yes.
Drew Johnson.
Yes.
Randy Frost.
Yes.
Kathleen Whitegadich.
Yes.
Mike Porterlies.
Yes.
Chris Torty.
Yes, and replat 24-02 passes. Thank you for the presentation. Next, we have a site plan. Site plan, as a reminder, have no public hearings. There's a correction to our agenda. It says site plan 24-02, but the actual site plan is 24-05. So for site plan 24-05, this is a pass-fail site plan, a request submitted by 1635 Ironwood LLC, Ronak Patel, seeking final site plan approval for a 6,000 square foot Star convenience store and gas station located at the north side of 12th Street, approximately 275 feet west of Capitol Avenue.
Yes.
And Mr. Ruby is up at the mic.
Up again. Again, we're seeking final site plan approval for this C-store location here. We have been working with the city with regards to the requirements of some revisions to some drive alignments, things like that, to meet the requirements for the development here. That some of it being landscape and additional landscape to the north edge, as well as the south, and that drive alignment to better align for the traffic flow in and out. With that, we're seeking site plan approval, and if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer those.
Questions?
I have a couple.
Mr. Emmons.
Where Scooters is on 12th Street?
Yes.
And their driveway is a long way down 12th Street.
Correct.
In and out. Is that the same driveway that?
Correct.
That this petitioner is going to be using?
Yes, because of the lot layouts and where the drive locations are back from the intersection of 12th and Capitol, we've created a frontage road with that previous development, and that services both the scooters and this facility.
Okay, that's the only question I have.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this?
It's not a question, it's a statement that the original scooters were supposed to install the right or the left turn lane. So between all this, you guys are going to work this out and get it installed?
That is obviously a separate matter from tonight's discussion, but yes, that has been brought up, and they are aware of that.
Okay.
Great. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
If there's no other discussion on that, I will take a motion on Site Plan 24-05.
Motion for approval?
Second.
We have a motion, and a second was Woody. Krista, would you please call for the vote?
Chris Jamrose?
Yes.
Drew Cash?
Yes.
Woody Emmons?
Yes.
Drew Johnson?
Yes.
Randy Frost?
Yes.
Kathleen White-Gadich?
Yes.
Mike Porterlies?
Yes.
Chris Doherty?
Yes, and Site Plan 24-05 passes. Some finishing items, old business, Mr. City Planner.
None.
New business.
None.
Privilege of the floor. Would anybody like to speak on anything that's not on the agenda tonight? Mr. Ruby? Nothing?
Mr. Bent?
Nothing? Mr. Bent? Nothing? I will call for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Let's go.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you all.
Till next week. Month, I mean.